California is staring down a $19 billion hole in its state budget. Recent federal cuts have severely reduced funding for Medi-Cal, the state's public health insurance program for low-income residents, putting essential medical care for millions on the chopping block. This animated chart reveals a stark contrast. While the line representing the state's public budget is plummeting downward, the line tracking the net worth of California's billionaires rockets in the opposite direction, having nearly tripled over the last 15 years. The technology empires that generated this extreme wealth were incubated right here, relying on local roads, public research, and regional talent. But the founders themselves operate independently of local geography. When state taxes threaten their bottom line, these executives can easily change their legal residency. Many have already shifted their primary addresses to states with no income tax to shield their assets. A state government is physically fixed in place. It has to pay for physical hospitals and schools. But its wealthiest citizens are highly mobile, capable of packing up their legal tax status and leaving the moment the bill comes due. The core of this wealth accumulation relies on unrealized gains. These are paper increases in the value of an asset, like a stock, that hasn't been sold yet. Because these gains haven't been cashed out, the IRS and state tax boards do not count them as taxable income. Instead of a standard paycheck, a CEO might take exactly $1 in traditional salary. They then use their stock portfolio as collateral to secure low-interest bank loans. The loan provides millions in cash to spend, and because debt is not classified as income, the money is entirely tax-free. Wealth managers call this strategy buy, borrow, die. By sidestepping traditional income, these executives end up paying an effective tax rate that is a tiny fraction of what a standard hourly or salaried worker pays out of every single paycheck. California relies heavily on taxing traditional income. The state's revenue department has no mechanical way to collect on paper wealth locked inside a brokerage account. Applying a standard income tax bracket to a billionaire who technically earns no income accomplishes almost nothing. Extracting revenue from these fortunes requires a completely different legislative approach. A coalition of healthcare unions has proposed Initiative Number 250024, officially named the 2026 Billionaire Tax Act. This ballot measure is explicitly designed to penetrate the unrealized gains loophole. The legislation is engineered with a hyper-specific scope. It applies only to individuals whose net worth exceeds $1 billion, a threshold that covers roughly 200 people currently residing in California. The core mechanism is a one-time 5% excise tax on a person's global net worth. As this visual demonstrates, the tax actively bypasses directly held real estate. Instead, the 5% slice is carved directly out of the individual's stock holdings, private equity stakes, and intellectual property. Proponents project this extraction will generate $100 billion. The text of the initiative legally mandates that 90% of those funds be locked into an account strictly designated for the state's healthcare system. This is a direct extraction of hoarded assets. It forcibly liquidates wealth that has been completely insulated from state tax authorities. The initiative does not stop at publicly traded shares with clear market prices. It aggressively targets the private tech startups of Silicon Valley, where valuations are notoriously difficult to pin down. To stop founders from undervaluing their private companies to avoid the tax, the bill imposes a rigid mathematical formula. It calculates the entity's book value and adds a multiple of its earnings, locking the startup into a taxable baseline value. The bill also targets supervoting shares, a corporate structure where founders hold minority equity but majority voting control. Under this legislation, a founder's taxable ownership percentage is legally presumed to match their outsized voting power, dramatically increasing their calculated wealth. The reaction from Silicon Valley has been swift and heavily funded. Executives like Peter Thiel and Google co-founder Sergey Brin have already poured millions of dollars into political action committees dedicated to killing the initiative before it reaches the ballot. For these founders, this battle is about protecting the specific corporate control structures that allow them to govern tech empires without outside interference. The unions backing the measure argue that the ultra-wealthy are acting as freeloaders, holding $2 trillion in collective assets while the state's medical infrastructure collapses under budget cuts. Opponents warn that passing the tax will trigger a disastrous exodus.
Even Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom has forcefully opposed the initiative, citing the immediate economic damage of driving the state's top investors away. Because California relies heavily on the traditional income tax paid by its top earners, capital flight poses a massive risk. If these billionaires change their legal residency before the new tax takes effect, they take their current tax contributions with them, which could gut the state budget even further. There are also severe legal hurdles. Opponents are preparing to challenge the tax in federal court, arguing it violates the Commerce Clause, which prevents states from interfering with interstate trade, and the Takings Clause, which prohibits the government from seizing private property without just compensation. California voters are facing a high-stakes ultimatum. They can call the billionaires' bluff and risk accelerating a budget collapse, or they can back down and concede that the wealthy are too mobile to tax. The 2026 Billionaire Tax Act has escalated into a definitive test case for the broader American economy. If the initiative fails, it provides strong evidence that highly mobile citizens are effectively beyond the jurisdictional reach of state and local governments. But if California manages to implement this law and survive the resulting legal challenges, it provides a functional blueprint. Other states facing similar budget deficits will instantly look to replicate the mechanics of taxing unrealized gains. This ballot measure will determine if the traditional social contract can still be enforced through legislation, or if modern wealth has finally grown too large and too fast for any single state to contain.